Hello, and welcome to Excel 2016. We're going to shift gears a little bit here and talk about a crowd favorite, VLOOKUP. Now, VLOOKUP is one of the most sought-after skills when it comes to Excel database management. However, many people don't take the time to learn VLOOKUP because it feels scary, complex, overwhelming even. VLOOKUP is all about using a single search value to search an entire database and output a particular value. It stands for vertical lookup. In this example here, we're searching for employee ID. When we find the employee ID, what we'd like to do is find the output for last name, first name, department, and pay rate. To do that, VLOOKUP identifies a value, and then we tell it how many columns to the right of that value the output is. So let's get started. Go ahead and place your cursor in cell B4. Just like in previous instances, we could start by just typing an equal sign and then VLOOKUP. However, again, that's the long way. Instead, what I'd like to do is insert functions once again. This time I'll go through the process of selecting Insert Function, once again from the Formulas tab, or you can use the FX button here on the left of the formula bar. Using either one, you'll pop up here. Go ahead and search for VLOOKUP, all one word, and click Go on the right-hand side. Instantly, VLOOKUP bubbles up to the top and we get our definition. VLOOKUP looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. Interesting. So let's take a look at that first line there. Looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table. This means that whatever value you're searching for must be the furthest column to the left. It can't search anything to the left of that. So that's a really important limitation to keep in mind. In fact, many people consider it to be the limitation when it comes to VLOOKUP. So let's go ahead and find the VLOOKUP option and click OK. And here you go. We're now inside the VLOOKUP function arguments box. The first thing it's asking for is the lookup value. Again, if you're not sure what that is, simply place your cursor inside of it and you'll get a breakdown. The lookup value is the value to be found in the first column of the table. In this case here, our lookup value is employee ID. This is the field that we have that we like to use to find last name, first name, department, and pay rate. So we're going to give it a click. And because this is the only cell, we're going to go ahead and absolute reference it just for good measure. Remember, we absolute reference by tapping the F4 key. The next thing it's asking for is the table array. Not sure what the table array is? Boom, right here. Table array is the table of text, numbers, or logical values in which data is retrieved. This is where we're searching for not only the value we're looking for, but the outputs we want. So essentially, that's all of this. So go ahead and inside the table array, now go ahead and click on cell A9. Now I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to select the rest of the data without having to click and drag, because we have no idea how many rows could be in here. By pressing and holding the Shift and Control keys, again, pressing and holding those down, tap the right arrow key once. You'll notice that now the flashing marquee encompasses everything from A9 to I9. I'm still holding the Shift and Control keys. I'm now going to tap the down arrow key. And check it out. It's brought me down all the way to row 46. Pretty cool, right? Once you've selected all that data, go ahead and tap the Tab key. So our table array is A9 through I46. In fact, we should probably absolute reference this as well, because that's not changing either. To absolute reference it, highlight everything inside the table array and tap the F4 key. You should have $4 total inside the table array field. Only 2 more fields to go, the column index number. This is the number in the table array from which the match and value should be returned. In this case here, how many columns from the left is the last name column? So if employee ID is column 1, then last name must be column 2. Remember, the search column does count as a column still. So the column index number is going to be 2, 2 columns from the left of the edge of the data. The last thing it's asking for is the range lookup. Now the range lookup is really important because it essentially determines whether you're going to get a relative match or an exact match. So let's say we're searching for an employee ID number that doesn't exist. Accidentally, we type in 1055 instead of 1054 or 1056. What would you rather have? An error that says that employee number doesn't exist? Or Excel guessing what it thinks you meant? When it comes to database functionality, you never want Excel to guess. If you're searching for something that doesn't exist, you always want it to tell you, hey, that's not there. For those instances, and really for almost all instances, the range lookup will be false, indicating that we want an exact match. Now you can type false, or you can use its binary equivalent of 0. So let's recap here. The lookup value is cell A4. That's where that cell is right there, meaning whatever number is inside there, that's what it's searching for. The table array is where our search field is and our answer field. In this case here, our search field is column A, all the way to column I. That's where our last output is. And we've absolute referenced both instances because no matter what, it should always reference the lookup value in that same spot and the table array in this same spot. Before we even click OK, our formula result tells us the response will be Smith. Let's double check. Employee ID 1054, let's find it. 1054, last name is Smith. So our VLOOKUP function is working. Let's click OK to lock it in. Not bad. Go ahead and pause the video to catch up with me here. Remember, we inserted the VLOOKUP function by using the Insert Function Arguments box. Simply click on Insert Function, search for VLOOKUP, and you're going to get this box right here. Our lookup value was the value we're searching with. Our table array was the data in which we are searching and in which contains the answer. Our column index number was how many columns from the left is the column output that we're looking for. In this case, the last name column was 2 columns to the left, from the left. And lastly, range lookup. Do you want a relative or an exact match? If it doesn't match, you want an error. So our range lookup is false or 0. Click OK to lock it in. Go ahead and pause the video. I'll meet you after the break. Now that we've built that function once, we probably really don't want to go through that process again. Fortunately, we had the foresight to absolute reference our lookup field and our table reference. So we can actually just autofill over to the right. Except it doesn't do exactly what we hoped it would do. Remember, we can always use our formula auditing tools to see what went wrong. But in this case here, I see that the column value simply didn't change. In order to fix that, I'm simply going to go in and change the value myself. Simply click on the first name field, and I'd like to jump inside my function argument box again. So select cell C4 and click on that FX button. This will bring you back into the VLOOKUP function arguments box. I see here that the column index number is still 2. However, the last name column is not 2 from the left. How many is it? 1, 2. It's 3 columns from the left this time. So 2 should actually be 3. And I'll go ahead and click OK. There we go. Let's do the same for department. How many columns from the left is department? 1, 2, 3, okay, 4. 4 columns from the left. Last one, pay rate. Once again, gonna click on the cell, hit the FX button. How many columns from the left is pay rate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 2 becomes 9. Click OK to lock it in. Boom. There you go. So now let's test our work and see how it goes. So 1054, let's try 1152. And check it out. Everything updates appropriately. Mark Henders is 1152. What about 1310? Boom. All right. Let's try an employee ID that doesn't exist to ensure that it's not going to give us anything we didn't expect. Let's try 1059. And we see here, there is no employee 1059. We get these NA errors. Pretty good. Now, one thing that we should keep in mind here is that this database isn't going to be just for us. In most cases, we're going to be building this to hand off to somebody who doesn't necessarily have the same skills that you do when it comes to working with an Excel. One particular problem with that is this: these errors. When an error outputs, we know that this is because this doesn't exist. But you know who doesn't know that? Pretty much anyone who's not taking this class right now. All they see is an error, and to them, that error means that whatever you built is wrong, and they're going to come and find you. So instead of having to deal with all these people coming back and saying, hey, your thing is broken, let's soften the blow and change this error alert to something a bit more user-friendly. How do we do that? Well, we can use another function out there called IFERROR. If you'll remember, if functions allow us to ask a question to Excel, and depending on that response, control the output, either with a value of true or value of false. IFERRORs work in a very similar way, but instead of giving you a value of true or value if false, it gives you a value if error, indicating that if an error occurs with a function that's already been built, you can control the output. So instead of getting this $NA, you could have it say something like unavailable. Now, I don't want to have to go and rebuild this function here. So instead, what I'm going to do here is, by clicking on cell B4, I'm going to navigate up to the formula bar and place my cursor between the equal sign and VLOOKUP. With my cursor there, I'm going to go ahead and type IFERROR and an open parentheses. Once I've typed IFERROR and an open parentheses, I'm now going to move my cursor to the middle of IFERROR, and I'm going to click on my function arguments box. Remember, cursor placement is incredibly important when using the insert function box. And check it out. We're now inside the IFERROR function box. So now you're seeing that you don't even need to build a function with the function arguments box in order to gain access to it later. So I've got my value, the value simply being the original function. However, if that value outputs an error, I have the value if error box. So what do I want it to say? Maybe I'd like my value if error box to say unavailable, or employee doesn't exist. Remember, put those quotations around when you're typing text. So go ahead and type in a value of error, and let's click OK to lock it in. And there we go. So now instead of showing me that ugly $NA sign, I'm getting no employee exists. Now, I could replicate this here, here, and here, or in these remaining cells, I could build an IFERROR function, once again, by clicking between the VLOOKUP and the equal sign, typing that open parentheses and opening the function arguments box. I could have it give me a blank cell for the remaining 3. To get a blank cell, simply type quotes twice. The double quote equals a blank cell. And go ahead and click OK. Go ahead and pause the video and take this opportunity to catch up. Build an IFERROR wrapper around last name and give it an output response. Then build an IFERROR function around first name, department, and pay rate, giving it a blank cell value. Once you've done that, unpause the video and come back for the next part. There you go. So now we have a fully functional VLOOKUP database. So if I search for an employee that does exist, like 1302, I get Randy Smith. However, if I search for an employee that doesn't exist, like 1055, I get no employee exists and a fully blank 3 additional cells. Not bad. So we're starting to see that VLOOKUP has a lot of power behind it. And in tandem with IFERROR, we can build a really nice looking database. Now there's one part when we were building the VLOOKUP function that we talked about, and it was the very last part, the range lookup. We talked about how in most instances we're going to want an exact match, because we don't necessarily want Excel guessing. The question often arises, when would I use true? When would I want a relative match? To answer that question, we have a bonus calculation table. Each of our employees here, Mickey, Donald, Bugs, people you may know, have their sales here, and what we'd like to do is calculate their bonus. Now, using VLOOKUP, let's try that out. I'm going to go ahead and build out a VLOOKUP function, starting here in cell C4. By clicking on the Formulas tab, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the Insert Function Arguments box. Fortunately, because VLOOKUP was the most recent function I used, it's up here at the top, and I can just click that and select OK. Of course, for you, if it's not, you can always use the search function to find it as well. So what's our lookup value? Well, our lookup value in this instance is going to be here, Mickey's sales. The next thing it's going to be looking for is the table array. Where is the data that we want output? And in that instance, that's going to be here. Now, because the table array is never going to change, and in most instances won't, it's a really good habit to be in to absolute reference the table array. The next thing it's asking for is the column index number. Now, in this instance right here, I'd like it to just tell me the bonus. So the column index is going to be 1, 2 cells to the right. So my column index number will be 2. Now remember, we talked about using range lookup, how in most instances we don't want a relative match, we want an exact match. So I'm going to type 0, and I'm going to click OK. And you'll see that I get an error message. The reason being is that 1200 doesn't exist inside the sales table. Instead, the way this bonus table is set up, it's when they exceed a certain value, they qualify for a bonus. So Mickey, because Mickey sold $1,200 in sales, should have qualified for a $10 bonus. However, I'm only getting an NA error because it was looking for an exact match. So let's fix that. Click on cell C4, and let's jump back into that Insert Arguments box. This time, instead of asking for an exact match using the absolute search, I'm going to look for a relative match by changing the range lookup from 0 to 1, indicating a true response. And I'm going to click OK. There you go. So now we see that Mickey gets a bonus of $10 because Mickey sold more than 1,000, but not more than 1,500. It's important to note that the relative reference will only find values that it's already exceeded. And in these instances, it's incredibly important to remember that when using relative range lookups, this table, the column that you're searching in, must be in ascending order. I'll say that again. When using relative range lookup, you absolutely must ensure that the column you are searching inside is sorted in ascending order. Ranges don't work well without that order sort. Now that we've built this function out, because we absolute reference to the table field, we can now autofill down, and boom, there we go. Donald sold $1,300 and therefore also gets a $10 bonus. Bugs sold $2,500 and therefore gets a $125 bonus. Daffy sold 850. Notice that because Daffy did not exceed 1,000, gets a $0 bonus. So now you're starting to see that there's a real-world use case for using range lookups that are not absolute. Now, let's take a look here. We see that there's also a third column for holiday bonuses. Maybe we'd like to handle that. Now, before we jump into that, go ahead and take this opportunity to pause the video and catch up with me here. You should have a bonus that directly correlates with the bonus column here. Go ahead and pause the video and catch up with me. Welcome back. Before we went on pause, we referenced that there's a third column that we don't seem to be able to search just yet. However, we do have the ability to build that functionality in. Is this a standard or a holiday bonus? Well, by clicking in that gray cell, you'll see that somebody, I won't name names, injected data validation. So now I can click on the dropdown and determine whether this is a standard or a holiday. Let's go ahead and click holiday and see what happens. Nothing. Yet. Because we haven't done anything with it yet. However, how could we get Excel to, in one situation, do one thing, and in another situation, do another? Well, how can we ask Excel a question? Somebody out there is screaming at the top of their lungs, if function, if function. And that person is right. We can use an if function to build out a if this says holiday, calculate the holiday bonus. And if it does not say holiday, calculate the standard bonus. So let's go ahead and do that. Just like what we did with the IFERROR function, we can build an if wrapper around the existing function. However, for the purposes of this class, we're going to keep things simple. Instead, go ahead and highlight the function that's already been built and delete it. We'll only do this for Mickey, and we'll carry it on for the rest. We're now going to go ahead and insert our if function from the logical function arguments box. Go ahead and find if from the logical function library and give it a click. So what's our logical test? If this cell equals holiday, then what? Well, in both instances, we want it to calculate a VLOOKUP output response. However, each of those will be slightly different. One VLOOKUP will look in the bonus column, and the other will look in the holiday column. So in this case, if it's true, that means that this cell says holiday, meaning that we should build a VLOOKUP function that outputs the holiday bonus. So let's go ahead and start by typing VLOOKUP, open parentheses. Remember that open parentheses is critical. Once we've typed that open parentheses, we need to open up the VLOOKUP function arguments box within this if function. So let's go ahead and find VLOOKUP in the formula bar and click on it. We're now inside the VLOOKUP function arguments box. So what's our lookup value? Well, it's still the sales. And the table array is still everything here. Remember to absolute reference your table array. And now our column index number. In this instance, we're trying to determine the value if true, meaning that we want to pull if true, that means that this says holiday and they should be getting the holiday bonus, meaning the column output should be 1, 2, 3. It's the third column from the left. Lastly, do we want a relative or an exact match? In this case, we want to allow for a relative match, so the range lookup will be either true or its binary equivalent of 1. Now don't click OK yet, because we're not done. It's really easy to forget that we're still inside the if function. In fact, that's probably the most dangerous part about the function arguments box, forgetting that you're still inside an if function, or any function for that matter. Once you're done building your VLOOKUP function, Go ahead and jump back into the if function arguments box by taking your cursor again to the formula bar and clicking on if. And there you go. So we've got our logical test. If C12 says holiday, calculate the value of true VLOOKUP, and the output is the holiday column. However, if the value is false, we still want it to calculate a VLOOKUP, but instead of pulling from the holiday column, we want it to pull from the standard bonus column. Now I really don't want to have to go and rebuild that VLOOKUP function. Fortunately, this function is almost identical to the one that we're going to build anyways. So go ahead and highlight that value of true, and using the keyboard shortcut of Control-C, or from the Home tab clicking the Copy button, go ahead and drop down into value if false and paste it. The only thing we have to change is the column output. You can change the column output by simply identifying that number 3 and changing it to the output of the column for the standard bonus. In this case, column 2. So we've got our logical test. If C12 says holiday, calculate the VLOOKUP with the holiday output. If this cell does not say holiday, calculate VLOOKUP with the output of this column, the standard bonus. Let's click OK and make sure everything works. And there it is. I'm now going to go ahead and autofill this function all the way down to ensure that everybody has the same if function built. But it doesn't seem to have done anything. Huh. What do you think went wrong? Someone out there, probably that same person that shouted if function earlier, is shouting, "You didn't absolute reference C12." Meaning that while this one cell is double checking to see if C12 says holiday, every other cell is checking C13, C14, 15, and so on. And those cells don't say holiday, meaning they're still getting the standard bonus. So let's fix that. By clicking on the function that we built already in cell C4, we're going to simply place our cursor on top of C12 and absolute reference it using the F4 key. Having done that, we're going to go ahead and tap Enter to lock it in. And now, finally, absolute reference it for the final time and autofill down. And there you go. Just like that, everybody gets the holiday bonus. But if I click and I change the holiday dropdown to standard, everyone gets a standard bonus. So there you go. By building this if function, we now have a fully automated bonus calculation table that, depending on whether or not it's a holiday or a standard payday, they get a bonus relative based on that content. We don't have to do the math anymore. With VLOOKUP and that relative range lookup, all we have to do is input the sales and tell it whether it's a standard or holiday bonus. Go ahead and pause the video and take this opportunity to catch up. It's time to talk about the red-headed stepchild of the lookup family, HLOOKUP. HLOOKUP is one of the most underutilized functions, but it is important to acknowledge that it does exist. HLOOKUP is the polar opposite of VLOOKUP. Instead of using the vertical search in order to output a value, it uses a horizontal search to find the individual row outputs. In this instance, we're searching for a specific product code, and we're trying to find the output in particular warehouses around the globe. In this case here, the product code is here, in the top row, meaning that we're going to be searching horizontally, and from here, finding the row output from the top. Let's go ahead and build it out. Placing your cursor here in cell B6, we're going to go ahead and insert our function arguments box by finding the FX button here or in the Formulas tab. Either way, go ahead and search for HLOOKUP, all one word once again. Once you find it, go ahead and click OK. It looks almost identical because it is identical. It's the same function, simply searching from a different direction. In this case, our lookup value will be here, B5. And because we have the foresight to know we're probably going to autofill this down, let's do ourselves a favor and absolute reference it now. The next thing it's looking for is the table array. Where is it going to be searching for XP200? And on top of that, where is it going to be searching for the outputs for warehouse 1, 2, and 3? It's going to be searching here, from A11 to G14. We're going to need to absolute reference that one as well because remember, always absolute reference the table array. You never know if you're going to be autofilling, so hedge your bets. The next thing it's looking for, our row index number, which, just like our column index number, only starting from the top this time. For this first one, warehouse 1, how many rows from the top is warehouse 1? In this case here, the first row of values we're searching is row 1. So warehouse 1 is row index number 2. Lastly, do we want an exact or a relative match? Well, this time we're talking about database functionality, so we don't want a relative match. We don't need Excel guessing. So our range lookup will be false, or its binary equivalent of 0. Having built that all in, go ahead and click OK to lock it in. And there you go. Now that we've built that out, we can autofill down and adjust the row value number as necessary. In warehouse 2, how many rows down is the warehouse 2? 1, 2, 3. So either by opening the function arguments box and changing the row index number here, or by changing it in the formula bar up here at the top, go ahead and make changes to warehouse 2 and 3 to ensure that they're outputting the appropriate value. The last one for warehouse 3, how many rows down is it? 1, 2, 3, 4 rows down. So 2 becomes 4, and there you go. So there you have it, HLOOKUP. Just like VLOOKUP, only the other way. Go ahead and take this opportunity to pause the video and try this out for yourself.